My name's David Wood. As chair of London Futurists, I'm going to say a few words about the relation between Futurism, spirituality, and faith. The basis of my concern here is the question of how do we improve ourselves? How do we improve society? And indeed, how do we improve humanity as a whole? And there are two different approaches that people can typically adopt. One of these approaches I've labelled as techno-progressive. This approach takes full advantage of technology and sees technology as a way in which lots of improvement can take place. It believes in engineering, actually building real solutions based on what we can learn from a scientific inquiry into causes and effects, based also on critical thinking that doesn't accept grand claims without due process and due inquiry. A techno-progressive view certainly believes in the importance of education, sharing these critical mindsets and scientific attitudes with as many people as possible. And it all comes down to rationality, having good reasons which can be discussed in an open way and for which good evidence can be found. A different approach, however, can be described under the general heading of spirituality. This approach puts more emphasis upon accessing our intuition or other hidden knowledge through practices such as meditation, prayer, or yoga. The idea is that there is age-old wisdom which is not yet included in the scientific inquiry, but which is important as we seek to build a better humanity. These approaches are often based on religious movements and often emphasize faith rather than simple rationality. The spirituality approach certainly has some advantages. Many of these movements have a real sense of community, with people really taking care of each other. Many of these movements have people with lots of passion and energy, people who really get things done. And there might be some aspects in which these movements do liberate hidden powers of the mind that aren't yet fully understood by a scientific approach. We should keep an open approach towards that possibility. On the negative side, people who pursue spiritual disciplines sometimes have the drawback that they see real progress as taking place in a life after death, not in this world. And they sometimes deny personal responsibility, seeing things as being due to karma or past lives and so forth. That's certainly a drawback. The biggest drawback may be that these movements are just too tied up with irrationality, too tied up with giving too much emphasis, too much credence to statements which came from a very long time ago and which there is little fundamental rational reason to believe. So what approach should techno-progressives and rationalist futurists take towards movements or individuals that promote spirituality and faith? One approach is to seek to ignore or sidestep these movements and individuals. Instead, we should get on with actually doing other things, like engineering real-world solutions. That approach makes sense for many individuals, but I don't think it's feasible on a larger level. On a larger level, religious movements have a great deal of power and influence, and are actually growing in some parts of the world. Some amount of overlap, whether it's conflict or discussion, is inevitable in many areas that are of interest to both techno-progressives and religious movements. That leads us to a second approach, to seek to oppose these movements, to seek to show the mistakes in the belief systems of these movements, to seek to point out the flaws in their practices. An alternative approach is to seek a more mutual respect through a positive dialogue to encourage two-way learning. It's possible, after all, that some of these religious teachings and spiritual disciplines do have insights which can benefit futurists and techno-progressives. Another approach is to imitate some of the organizational aspects and process systems of these movements, rather than taking on actual beliefs. In such a way, the communities and the organisational strengths of futurist movements might improve. Another approach is to seek to collaborate, to seek to find common cause with these movements, regardless of some differences of opinion. And last, there's the idea that some futurist movements might merge with and transform some spiritualist movements. To explore these important matters more fully, London Futurists has organised a meeting on this topic, Futurism, Spirituality and Faith. This will be taking place from 2 p.m. onwards on Saturday, September the 21st. It's in our usual venue, Birkbeck College, Torrington Square in central London. On this occasion, we'll have 4 different speakers, each representing different viewpoints as regards how techno-progressives or rational futurists should regard religious movements. I think we'll find many points of great interest in this discussion. I welcome you to take part in that debate and have your voice included. For more information, see our site londonfuturists.com, where you'll also find a lot more about other projects of London Futurists, or you can also find us on meetup.com.